Welcome to the September edition of Angular Birmingham. We're here together with my co-host Leon. So thanks, Leon, for organizing this.
Fine.
And then we have Jeffrey and Muhammad as well. So tonight we're gonna start with Muhammad first, and then with Jeffrey, and at the end we have a bit of a Q&A. So let's start then. So Muhammad, if you wanna share your screen.
I was excited these things. When is it going to happen?
Can you share your screen?
Yeah, I'm sharing it now.
No, I can't see it in here, in the list.
Yeah. Give me a second.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, is my screen shared?
Yeah, that's it. Okay, over to you now.
Okay, so yeah, hello guys. First of all, thank you for joining us in the Angular Birmingham here. So my name is Muhammad Awais. I'm a full stack software engineer, and I want to present on how to communicate with backend services using Angular HTTP, which is an amazing and absolutely most useful topics and useful concept while working on Angular applications. So let's deep dive into it. Okay. So going a bit in the technical discussions, let me introduce firstly myself. My name is Muhammad Awais. I'm a full stack software engineer working on front end and back end technology stacks. Until now, front end on the front end part heavily. I have worked on. So, and the technology I love the most is about the Angular, which is absolutely founded by Google, and we are using TypeScript into it. Over again. And as far as the community part is concerned, I'm Pakistan's first AWS DevX mentor and then Auth0 ambassador and a Postman Supernova as well. And absolutely, I'm a Angular community member and a Google GTG as well. So, yeah, this is all about me. While talking on this Angular HTTP, the first question will arise like after this tech talk, what we will gonna learn in when this talk is like consumed, when this talk happen. So that is like after the end of this call, in after the end of this technical talk, we will gonna learn about we will have a concept about working with the Angular HTTP client, like to consume the backend APIs to get the data from backend services and to store the data and manipulation data. So manipulation of the data. So if you can see in the image you can see on the screen, so it is like having showing the chunks in the center. We have looking into the Angular application, which is a client web app, and on the right hand side we have a server. So a user is manipulating and sending over the data to the server with using the Angular application. So this is all about the concept of Angular HTTP, which is pretty foremost in all of the technologies. We have the HTTP. It is the most important topic. While if either we are working on any of the technology like many multiple programming languages or the tech stacks like Angular, React, and kind of stuff. So this is actually the foremost concept while working on the applications and applications, PWAs, or either mobile applications. So in this talk, we will gonna learn how we will communicate with backend using the Angular. So in this kind of stuff, Angular had provided us Angular HTTP client. So let's talk about it in detail. So first of all, we will going to take a look like what is HTTP client in Angular. HTTP client is like a service which is provided by Angular. We have this service belongs to HTTP client module. So in which we will going to communicate with the server to the HTTP protocols. Either we are sending data and getting data back from services using the APIs developed by the backend developers or kind of stuff. So Angular provides this HTTP API. that service actually belongs to HTTP client module. So yeah, that is kind of HTTP client in Angular. So let's talk about some technical kind of stuff, like how we can set up Angular HTTP client in our Angular application. So the first thing we have to do is we have to import the HTTP client module in our Angular application. In the If you are an Angular developer, so app.module is a main entry gate while we are working on the Angular application. So that's actually the main entry point in which that app.module.ts, our HTTP client module, if you can see on diagram 3. So that is HTTP client module imported in the Angular. So after that, we have to declare that HTTP client module in the imports array. After that, and let's go on. That is the first step while we are setting up the Angular HTTP client in our Angular applications. The second thing we have to do is we have to inject that HTTP client service in our application class. Like assume that I'm working on users API, users component. So inside that, I actually want to collaborate with the backend to get some data into to send some data to the server with the APIs. So for that kind of stuff, actually, I will communicate and I will send the data to the backend with the kind of user service which will be connected with my component. So in that service, second step is we have to declare we import that HTTP client service which belongs to Angular Common HTTP, and that will be taken care from Angular HTTP module. And the third step is we have to create the methods in which we will consume the HTTP methods like get, post, port, page. These are actually the HTTP words, which is pretty clear and pretty similar in throughout the technology, throughout the languages like either Angular, React, or Vue, and kind of stuff. So in this, actually, the third step, we are going to consume the HTTP.get method, which is from HTTP client service. So if you can see the snippet, and we have a get users method. Inside that get users, we are returning a statement which said this dot HTTP dot get, and we are passing a backend endpoint here and sending some parameters here. So the HTTP.get is HTTP is a constructor we have created in which we have pointed our HTTP client service. So we are consuming the .get method from that HTTP client service. If you are going ahead, so now till now I have showed these kind of stuff on the slide. So let's talk. Let's see how Angular HTTP works in action. So yeah. Let me share my screen. Let me share my screen on the code base so I can show you guys how this will be going to work. Okay, so is my screen shared now? Hello?
Yes, yep, it's shared now. We can see it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so this is a kind of a small application. Let me start it first, and we will going to take a look on it, how the Angular HTTP is implemented in this application. So this is actually a small kind of application I have created to give you guys some demo. So like how Angular HTTP client is working on. So in the code base, this is a public repository on GitHub. So you guys can take a look on it after the call, after the tech talk. So here, if you can see, this is a pretty simple kind of folder structure here. So inside that, I have an app directory, and inside the app directory, we have a core directory, and inside that, I have created a config service. So the first thing I will gonna show you, this is the app.module. inside here on line number 3, we have imported that HTTP client module, and we have also called that HTTP client module service, and we have added that in our imports array, which is being declared on line number 18. So as you guys can see here. And the second thing we're gonna have to do is inside that inside the core directory, I have created a service. The second step is to consume that HTTP client service from that HTTP client module. So on line number 2, if you can see, so we are actually consuming this HTTP client service here, and inside the constructor we have created a constructor here. So if you can see on line number 16, from here I have created a method which says get users. So the get users method is being responsible to get some data of users from an endpoint. So that is being responsible for this. So the third thing is you have to do that. But before that, before consuming that service and before calling that the HTTP verbs methods from the HTTP client service, you have to do some good things, like as far as the following the good practices the Angular community prefers also. So the first thing we have to do is inside the environments, I have to create an object property which will saying API base URL. So while consuming an API call, we have an endpoint. So if there are actually multiple code smells in our application, we don't organize that and we don't recognize those. But as far as the application grows up, so those code smells will be a main hectic for you to rehearse and like refactor the code. So before going into that anti-pattern kind of stuff, first of all, you have to architect your code in the manner that it will not disturb you ahead. So the first thing we have to do is inside the environments.ts, we are gonna creating a property which says API base URL, which API base URL is what? It's actually a starting endpoint, a base URL for our backend domain. Like assume that I have a backend application deployed by or developed by my backend team. From the backend developer, it says like www.example.com/ and after that API, and after that v1 slug, and after that v1 we are having with multiple endpoints like users, post, and kind of stuff. So the main starting endpoint, which will be going to be similar throughout the API calls. So that starting point, that starting base URL, I will be creating an endpoint. I will be creating that base URL object here in my environment file. So the first thing, this is actually the good thing to do that. And then after, I have a config service. Inside that config service, I'm using that environment, and I've created an object which says API endpoint. So these two things are actually the good things to do firstly before rather than calling the endpoint in your applications directly. You have to do that. That's the good thing here. Now after that, and if you are going inside now, let's take a look on the user service. Let's talk about it. So now inside the user service, you have also this was the second step to include the HTTP client in our service and use this in the class of that service. So after that, you can see there's a config service. So that's config service is using the environment API base URL, and we have exposed the API endpoint here. So we are using now that endpoint by calling that config service in the same user service, which will be gonna using the HTTP verbs and getting and manipulating the data from backend. So I have created a constructor of HTTP, and I have also created a constructor of config here, which is consuming the config service. So let's talk about this get users method, which will be going to consume http.get method from the HTTP client service. So that will inside that get service, we only have to pass some URL like the endpoint for the backend API. From that, my service will be getting the data from the backend, and also I have to pass some parameters like which page you are currently, and any other parameters like date or ID you are going to send here. So those kind of parameters, we have to pass that in the params kind of place. So if you can see inside the get users, I have created a HTTP params here, which are also provided by HTTP client common service. So while that, I am setting the parameters here, like I have set the page. So inside the component, I will going to consume this service method here there. So From there, I will be passing the page number from there. Okay, like let's suppose I will be having a list of page, and like assume that I'm on the page number 1 now. I have seen out throughout the data, and I want to go on page number 2. I want to fetch the data from backend again for the next record. So for that kind of purposes, we have to send some parameters to our API. Okay, so here I'm setting the parameters which will be going in terms of page. And also you can see here on from line number 23, I have also created a method. That add user method is being responsible to post new data to my backend API to my backend through my backend APIs. So inside that add user, it's pretty simple. I have to call the post verb of the HTTP, and I'm going to passing the URL, same as the GET request. Inside that URL, I will be passing like, okay, this is my endpoint, and okay, the second parameter is data. Okay, you have to take this data to the backend through the channel of APIs, and you have to store that data in my backend. So this is kind of two pretty simple methods I have created here. One is the get users, and the second one is add users. So the get users is responsible for getting the data from my backend, and the add user is being responsible to store the data in my backend service. So these two are created here. Now the third step is we're gonna have to consume the service methods inside the component. That's actually the consistency and the preference of Angular standards. Like we have to make our components very clean and clear, like neat and clear. So now if I'm going inside the modules, inside that modules, I have a user module which is created by lazy loading approach. So you guys can. This is actually a simple. Another talk, so I will be doing that in another one. So for now I'm going to show you inside the listing one. So if we can go inside the listing component of users module, let me show you that. So that's here, listing component. So if you can see that component, it's very neat and clean. Like no any API calls are there currently, because this is also one of the code smell we have to take care of. Like either we are working on the Angular applications, like many of the code bases and many of the developers don't know about this thing, and they always like they make this huge mistake to call and consume the HTTP calls in components directly, which is a very bad practice. We have to follow some consistency, and we have to create an external service files. Inside the services, we have to consume our backend, and after that we will be consuming that here. So if I'm going back and revising that, so we have you remember we have created a user service. Inside that we have created a get users method, and so inside my listing component now I will be consuming the same user service in my component. So inside my listing component, if you can take a look on it, on line number 2, I'm calling that service here, the user service. So that service is being now responsible to manipulate between the data and what kind of data is going, like operations going beyond. So I don't have to worry about this. I have only some methods. I have to talk with those methods. So implementation is behind that wall. So if you can go, if you can see that, I have initiated the user service. I have imported that user service, and now what I'm doing, I've created a user service here, and after that user service, I have created a method get user listing here. Okay, inside that get user listing, if you can see, I have directly called that. I'm saying, okay, I want get users method from user service, and what is this one going as a parameter? So if you can see, we are going to pass some page number here while getting the users. Okay, now I want to tell my backend API like, okay, I want data of users for page number 1. So that's why I'm passing the parameter here, which is written in my service. So from that user service, I'm going to call get users method, and I'm subscribing that method because this is an observable by default. HTTP client service verbs are observables. So I have to treat with like kind of observers. So I'm consuming that method, and I'm here response is a callback. Inside that callback, like once this API will be called, so what response I will be taken from the backend, so that will be going in the res keyword, which is mentioned here. This is a callback. So after that, I have created two like users array here and the complete data here. So these are kind of stuff, and this is a page number. I have hard-codedly created a static page number for now. So yeah, and once this request will be successful, so the whole data will be going in this dot data. However, the list of users which will be coming from backend, which is inside the res.data. So let's talk about this. I will show you some code here so that you guys can take a look on it. So if we can go in localhost for 200, so I have created this single application. If we can go inside the inspect, and we are gonna taking this like, okay, how the data is coming here. So let me console this dot data. I can show you like what's the data hole coming on here. So now you can see here, this response is coming from the backend. That response is what the response is consistent, like, okay, total pages are 2, and total objects, total records for the users are 12. So I have requested page number 1, and the per page records will be 6. So if I'm going to expand this data, so inside the data you can see I have an array. So what is this about? Now what how I'm making the URL. The first thing is to that, and also I have also created a URL here, and that URL, if you can see this .config.api endpoint, this is kind of the base URL consuming from environment file. And after that, you can see I have passed my hard-coded endpoint like API/users for now, because I'm consuming the API users. So that kind of stuff. So this is on the right hand side, you can see a list of users. So that users is a listing component. And if I'm taking a look on the right on the left side, which is add edit user, that's actually a pretty simple form. So let's clear the console out here, and let's take a look like how this form is working. So if I'm going inside that add and edit form, so inside that add edit form, I'm also going to consume that user service, which I've been consuming my listing component. So inside that add and edit component, if you remember, inside the user service, if you can see, we have a add user method here as well, which is being going to consume the .post verb from my HTTP client service, and that is being responsible to send. That is being responsible to take some data from front end, and that will be going to store in the backend. So inside that add and edit component, if you can see, I have also used the reactive forms here. That's another concept of Angular as well. So you can find my articles over dev.to, which I've also declared. I have also added some lazy loading concept in my README file in this repo, so you can take a look on it as well. So inside that add and edit component, if you can see, let's talk about the HTTP method, how I'm adding the data to the backend. So this is an on submit method. Then that on submit method will be called once I will be submitting this form. So what this form is doing? So on submit method, I'm getting some form values from my HTML file on the on submit, and that form data, that form values, that will be I'm storing those values in the late keyword data object. And after that, I'm consuming the add user method, and that add user method is being responsible to send some data from front end to back end for storing purposes. So if you can see, I'm using add user from user service, and I'm passing some data here. And that data will be responsible because if we are going in user service, so add user method is being that is actually being taken a data parameter here. So I have to pass some data which is being required by backend. So from here, I'm passing the data, which data is like program form dot value. Inside that, I have a whole object of user, and that object will be going to the backend. And after that, this is also kind of observable. As I already told you, the HTTP client service verbs are the returning as observables. So that's why I'm using subscribe here. And then after that, subscribing this method, sorry, after subscribing this method, I have declared a callback here. And once this request will be successful, I'm going to receive some data from backend. And on that backend data, I have actually created a simple alert so that we can see, okay, this kind of user is being created at our backend. So let's take a look on the live app. So on the left-hand side, you can see if I'm saying Muhammad Awais. And let's suppose I'm saying my designation is like senior software engineer. So I'm going to do this. So once I will be submitting that form, so you guys can analyze my log is cleared. So you will have to some response will be coming from backend. So we have to take a look on it. So once I will be submitting that form, so you can see there is an alert which came here, and which alert is being used what? That alert is being responsible to show some data which is coming from backend. From backend, there's some kind of responses coming in the callback. So I'm fetching dot name property from that response callback, and I want to show that. So it says Muhammad Awais user created. So that is kind of an alert. And also you can see like this object is came from backend. Okay, the name is this and the job designation is this and ID is this, which is dynamically created key. And then like it's also said created on this date and this time. So this is the whole concept of how Angular HTTP works. So on my GitHub, you guys can find, and I will also drop this URL of GitHub in the chat of the live tech talk, so you guys can have take a look on it. So this is kind of pretty clear structure, and it's been very useful for you guys to avoid the code smells, to avoid the code smells while working with API integrations in our Angular application. So this is kind of a good thing here. So this is all about myself, and so yeah. So after that, like we have taken a look on it, like how Angular HTTP works live here when we are manipulating the data, when we are sending data from front end to back end, and if we want to get some data from back end to front end. So these kind of manipulations, we have an Angular, we have an HTTP protocols and services exposed by Angular. So we are going to use that. And as we already know, Angular is some kind of very amazing platform, amazing framework. So all things are plug and play. Just we have to do by avoiding the code smells to be architecting the good things. So yeah, this is all about me, and this is the GitHub URL. You can find the repository URL here on Muhammad Awais Sheikh here, and it's ng-bram Angular HTTP. Don't worry about this. I will be sharing that GitHub on the tech talk here, running on the chat here, and you can find out there. There are also some cool slides here. I will also share them as well. So yeah, this is all about me.
Cool, thank you very much. So we'll go to, let's see if there's any questions. All right, so we have let's take this question and then we'll go to Jeffrey.
Yeah, sure.
What you were using to serve the backend data?
Sorry, can you please come again?
What were you using to serve the backend data for the server? What did you use for the API?
Okay, so for APIs, for now, I have used a sample kind of regress endpoint, which I have mentioned in the environment file. So that regress is nothing. It's a sample backend APIs to do that. However, as far as the backend is concerned, I love Nest.js, which is a progressive frameworks backend for built within Node.js. So that kind of very powerful. So you can do that. Yeah, there are also some kind of repositories created on my GitHub, so you guys can take inspiration from there.
Yeah, Nest is awesome.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Thank you. Let's.
Jeff also loves that.
Yeah. Okay, Jeffrey, over to you with the CLI and the builders. Looking forward to it as well.
So for everybody that's watching, I moved my stuff to the attic, and so I'm looking down to my screen sometimes because it's not yet in place. So sorry for that. I'm really looking at the chat and these kinds of stuff, but it's not optimal at the moment. But I will do my best to elaborate everything. Okay, let's present this. Okay, and I can see we're up. Okay, so Angular builders, the cool kid under the hood. Before we go deep into the Angular builders, my name is Jeffrey. I'm the organizer of the Dutch Angular group. And for the people that are watching and are looking for a place to start talking, we have a CFP and it's open. And it's also for the newcomers, but also for the experts. So if you have an idea and you want to talk about it, fill in our CFP. you can have a look at our Twitter account for that. And if not, just DM me and I will help you with it. I'm a member of an X-Layers project, and the X-Layers project is basically a Angular project where we transform design files from Sketch to code. And that can be Angular, but it can also be React, Svelte, or whatever. I'm a collaborator on the Scully project. For everybody who doesn't know what Scully is, it's like a Jamstack solution for Angular. I'm the author of NGX AWS Deploy, where you can deploy your Angular app to AWS, and I have some extra plugins if you want to have a look at. So what this talk is not, because there's a lot of things you can tell about builders, but I want to at least share this slide. It's not the way to create a builder. There are several ways, and just use it, use the one you want and use your own approach. This is the approach I did, and I've used regular, but just have a look at it, and if it fits your own coding skills and your way of working, use it. And you should not use builders for everything, but probably with this talk, you will know why. So before we go into builders, let's go back to Angular version 8 and before. When Angular version 8 was, or previous, you had a command called ng-eject. And ng-eject basically outputted the Webpack config in your workspace solution. And when you got this config, you could change it. You can say, okay, I want to have a specific solution or a specific Webpack plugin because I use these kinds of stuff, or I have these requirements. And the Angular team at some point said, okay, this is working, and probably a lot of people can use it. Maybe they call themselves the experts of Webpack, but Webpack is pretty complicated, and you need to really know what to do with it. So they said, okay, how can we help the community? How can we help them to do this more simple? And that is where basically builders came in. And a builder is basically nothing more than a function that runs a set of specific tasks. And what you can do is basically say, okay, I got a function and it does a couple of steps. And you can just program it, and we'll show it later in a demo, and it will just execute it. And this is possible because within the Angular CLI, there's something called the architect tool. And the architect tool, you can see it as a task-based system. It just runs tasks, it processes the task, and it does it based on builders. A builder itself needs two things. And it needs options, which also could be set inputs. And we can provide that within our angular.json. Or we can provide it as a user with the arguments of the CLI. For example, -- configuration is something that is an option for a specific builder. And on the other hand, we have context. And context that's provided by the CLI itself. It's nothing that we can do about. It's basically just there. But we can use it, see it as a API, like the Angular CLI API. We can do logging, we can schedule another builder, and there are some other stuff you can do there to make or use basically within your own builder. So my question to you is, are we using these builders today? Do you think we are using them, or are we using something completely different under the hood? And I can say, yes, we are using everyday Angular builders. The Angular team provides this. It's, for example, with the ng-serve, it's the dev server builder. Or ng-build, it's called the browser builder. And with ng-test, by default, it's the Karma builder. And you got a couple of others, as you can see on the screen, and they are by default already configured basically within the CLI and the project. Be aware the TSLand builder, it's deprecated, similar like the protractor builder. So have a watch out for that. If you're still on V12, it's not a problem. But from V12 and up, it's deprecated. And builders are, and that's the cool thing, is that builders are basically interchangeable. So where we use the dev server builder for ng-serve, we could use the custom Webpack server builder. Or if we do ng-build, we could use the ngx build plus builder from Manfred Steyer. And we see that the community is now using the ES lint builder from James Henry, for example, when we want to lint and verify our files. So we can do basically with a couple of adjustments, change the behavior of a specific Angular command. So these builders, how are we using them? So I think everybody knows this command. And ng build, and it's our application or our project, basically determining of the project you're working on. And the build part is called the architect target. The app part is called a project or project name, and we can see this in apps or libraries, basically. And how this works is basically that with the build command, we basically tell the Angular CLI, go look at the build part within the architect JSON property. And that's why it's also called the architect target. It's basically a property within the JSON of architect. And of course, maybe a couple of people already know, but we have a projects key, and within these projects are our applications or libraries. And that's basically saying to the CLI, okay, we need to use the build architect target from the project app, or in this case, in my example, a demo. So there is also another command that not many of us use, and that's basically ng-run. And ng-run is basically a generic command where you can add or use for your own custom builder. And again, we need to refer it in a specific way. So with ng-run, we can define our project name, our architect target, and even we can do the configuration basically. And it's not mandatory to do it like this. So you can just also do like ng-run app build or app your own custom builder. But basically, the production flag here is like an override for what you have. So you can have development or all the others. So now we know that builders are just basically functions, and they're also easy interchangeable. There is like a space where we can use our own builders for specific needs in a project. And I want to go a bit on custom builders and show you some code so that we now know how this works basically and how you can use it on your own project. So I've just made a couple of simple steps here. So we need to create a repository, but npm init, git init, and then we need to have two dependencies. And the dependencies we need is basically TypeScript, which is basically by default these days with Angular, and the Angular dev-kit architect package. This is basically the core of the things we need to use for Angular builders. We need to add some scripts for building and testing our package. I'm going to show you in a demo how I did it. So just use your own way. You can have a look at the repository I'm sharing later. But we need to have them in place. So now some builder specific things. When we have a project created, we need to add the builders.json. And basically in the builders.json, we need to refer to a property called builders. And this is basically telling the Angular CLI where it needs to look in which file for the builders part. And in this case, it's the builders.json, as you can see here. Within the builders.json, there's basically, again, a builders key, and then we have a list basically of the builders that are in our package. And in my case, I called the builder optimize, and you can just name it on your own. It doesn't matter which name it is. It needs to be clear, I think, for at least your co-workers or the people that are using this. Within the optimized part, there are three things. The implementation, and that's basically where our JavaScript code is compiled. And in my case, I just said, okay, when the TypeScript is compiling it, just put it in the dist folder. A schema, and a schema is basically something that validates our options, and we will have a look at this in the demo. And the description. And the description is here so that people know what this builder does. So in my case, this builder is going to optimize images for web quality. So the second thing we need to do then is add a index.ts, and we need to use the create builder function. And the create builder function comes from the Angular DevKit architect package. And what it does, it basically hooks up our function, our own custom function that we are going to implement, to the Angular internals. So the architect tool that's internally, that I said earlier, the task-based system, that is basically what it does. It just hooks up basically everything so that you can use it as a builder. And here we see again that we have the options and the context. And this is basically the builder context that's provided by the Angular CLI. So now we're going to have a look at some code. And basically, we're going to look at a builder that I made to optimize images. Let me switch over. And OK, yeah, this is working. And let's, OK, I think this is good. OK, let's go a little bit over the repository. So basically, this is my package.json. I have some standard definitions here. And here is my builders.json referral, basically in the package.json. I've added some script. As you can see, I just do a plain build with TypeScript, nothing fancy here. I'm using a bit of prettier, and I copy the schema at some point after the build so that it's also placed in the dist folder. So again, in the builders.json, as I mentioned earlier, let me close that down. I just have the exact same content basically that I showed in the presentation, so that's not different. And then go to the index.ts. And as you can see, there's a bit more here. Let me go a little bit so that we have it in one screen. But basically, let's go over this. So on the bottom, let's start over there. I just export the default, the create builder wrapper. So this is basically the wrapper that we get from the Angular CLI. I'm just saying, OK, go to this function. When this builder is here, just execute this function. And it expects the options, as I already mentioned. And I made a type here, basically that's saying, OK, it's from or my schema or the JSON object. And I have the builder's context from the Angular CLI. And for example, here I'm using the logger that's in the context to output a message on the warn level, say, OK, start optimizing. And here I just implemented basically some code that is just going to have a look at some images and converts them basically to a new one. But what you see is that a lot of these options are still being used. So how are they then defined here? And that's basically within our schema.json. And the schema.json is basically a kind of blueprint for our input properties. And I've made several. For example, quality is like the quality of the picture. And as you can see, I just give it a type. And the type is basically a number. So for example, if I would use an array or something different or an object, it will validate basically if the input property defined by the angular.json file or defined by a custom Angular CLI argument is a number or is an array, depending on this type. Again, a description, it's again here just so that everybody knows what this specific property is, and we can define a default. And with this default, it is basically saying that if it is not provided by the Angular CLI arguments or not provided in the angular.json, then just use this default. And I just made a random number of 70. And I added a couple of others. And as you can see, I just said, OK, I just want a folder. And that's also always in our Angular project source assets. And the extensions that they are looking for, it's basically PNG, JPEG, or TPEG. And on the bottom, there's a nice thing you can see, and that's basically required. And what you can do with the required property is basically say, OK, this property, for example, extensions, if you put it in the place of the array, then it will validate if it is provided in the Angular.json or provided by the Angular CLI arguments. If it's not, it will fail and throw an error. So if you have a specific builder where you say, okay, I need to have at least these required properties, and you don't have any defaults, then you need to fill in here one of the properties that are defined here. I've added a schema.ts just basically for type safety. That's the only reason. You don't have to do it, but I would recommend it that you at least use an interface to help you with programming. And this is basically what it is. So it's nothing really fancy. It's just doing some renames and outputting some information basically to the console. One of the things you need to know is that the return of this function always has a specific way. And that is basically that there always should be a success property. And it's basically telling the Angular CLI that it's the execution of the builder is good, or it failed in some reason. And when it failed, you also can provide an error. But if you don't define it, the builder theoretically maybe could be running. There are some there are some things in the Angular CLI that prevent that, but basically you always need to define a success property, true or false, depending on the state. Okay, so let's go to a package or a project I made. I just did a ng-new, nothing fancy here. I just did a reference to the file that's called immunization. So I just made it basically, let's clear the logs, reference it here so that I don't have to push it somewhere. And I added it to the angular.json. And let me close this one down. These are the schematics. This is the build. Oh, wait. Oh, here it is. Optimize. I was wondering where it was. So basically, within the project, I just added within the architect target the optimize key, and I just added these properties by hand. I didn't use any schematics. Normally, when you have a builder, you would add some schematics basically here to do these kinds of stuff. But I just copied it over to this project, and I said, okay. When the ng run command, Birmingham optimize, we should use this builder. And I said, okay, the builder is from the package imagization, and the builder that is the executable builder that is in there is called optimize. So this is the definition that the Angular CLI team has made, where you can say, okay, it's this package with this builder that's inside there. And as you can see, I got an option, and that's basically the quality to 1. And I just pressed this hinting here, so it just run. But let's refer a little bit of this so that you all can see how this works. So now I can do ng run Birmingham optimized. When we do this, it will console the start optimization that I have there. It found apparently 3 matches in the assets folder. That should be here, and that's true. And it optimized the images. So, and we can see that, and I hope you guys, the viewers can see it also, that the image quality is indeed from pretty good to, well, barely recognizable, I would say. And it does this basically for all the images. What we also can say is, well, I want to have a quality of, well, let's say 50. So we can now override basically the changes. And if you look at the pictures, we can see maybe a little bit of change, but it's probably not that good visible on the YouTube stream. But you can say, I can see it pretty that there is a small difference here. Okay. Now, well, so the cool thing is that we now easily could add also the quality here. So we can say, okay, by default, we want in this specific project, we want to have the quality to 70. But for example, if you have a a CI part where you want to say, okay, I want to have the image quality to 50 always in our production build, we can just override basically the configurations there. Oh, and maybe something I just saw for the people that are watching, a cool thing. You should definitely check out the Angular CLI. There's a persistent build cache, which makes your Angular CLI builds even quicker. So just a small hint there then. So where should we use builders? Well, we could use it for image optimization, as I showed, but we could also just go and test or use another test framework. For example, if you want to try out if Angular could be hooked up with the test framework Ava, I would recommend using a builder. It's pretty easy, and it will help you a lot of ways. But probably one of the main good points to use a builder is when you have a specific way of releasing your projects. So say that team A has to generate a change log and deploy it on a specific place and have a couple of these things, update a specific wiki page. We could all make these kinds of tasks in a builder. And we can then say to another team like team B, hey, we made this builder, you can use it, and it will make your life easier when you're releasing a new version of your project. So there are a lot of good cases where a builder can help you when releasing in a specific way in several teams, for example. And another way is to run, for example, an Angular app on your desktop with Electron. There's a package called ngx electronify where you could basically add it to your Angular project, and it will run your Angular app in Electron and in the browser, so it will be both, so that you also can play around with how your app responds basically on a desktop environment. So a summary of what we learned is basically that builder are task-based functions, and they are just plain function. It's nothing special. It's nothing that we can't do. We can use this because it's our functions. We can use it for all kinds of processes related to our workspace. It can be almost everything, you can say. And it's one of the main building blocks in the CLI. So you won't have to worry that it will go away soon, because the Angular CLI itself heavily relies on these patterns. And for example, with the release builder that we just saw, like in the use case, it will save a lot of time when you just make repeatedly tasks in a builder for specific projects. And I've added a bonus slide because I think in the community, the Annex, the CLI tool from the Narwhal team, is heavily used, especially for the Birmingham group. I thought, well, we need to do something special. So I saw that Annex Conf was, and I was, okay, but what are executors then? Are they like builders, or what are they? And yes and no, they have the same purpose. Basically automate a couple of things in your workspace and use it. Basically, it's a little bit different because the Narwhal team basically added some cool ways to make functions interchangeable, and that's pretty neat. And that's also the big difference, is that under the hood, there's a little bit of a different implementation, because Annex does a bit more than the Angular CLI itself. Because, for example, Annex can check your code if there are affected changes and run then a specific builder on that. And that's not something the Angular CLI builders do. If you want to have a look at these executors, I would recommend the Annex Conf that was, I think it was last week, and check out the talk by Yuri. He did an amazing job on telling what executors, but also generators are. So check out this. I've looked up some resources, so I'm going to share the slides later on Twitter, or I can share them with the organizers to how I learned builders, and I would definitely have a look at these stuff. Well, and then thank you very much. Thank you for having me. You can find me at my Twitter handle over there, and if you want to have a look at a builder, then you can just go to my repository.
All right then. Thank you very much. It doesn't look that scary now after you explained it. I'll definitely, when I have a use for it, yeah, I'll definitely watch this back again and hopefully build some.
Again, it's not fit for every use case, but probably the best fit for everybody is like if we have a couple of projects and we want to deploy it all, for example, to a specific place and with a change log, etc., 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 and we are doing these repetitive tasks.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so we have some questions.
Sure, I hope I can answer them.
Is it common to use custom builders?
I would say that the most people are not using custom builders, and why is that? One, the Angular team itself has a lot of good builders, for how to transform to a specific browser version, etc., etc. That's all handled by the CLI itself. And there are a couple of community plugins or builders, like NGX Build Plus, where you want to have something extra, let's call it like that. So probably a lot of people won't use any custom builder. Even I don't use custom builders on a daily basis. But in specific tasks, for example, a generation of a Angular project where the folder structure needs to be in a specific way, I use a builder in a way there. But that's like a really specific case.
Yeah. Well, it's good to know that, for those specific cases, builders can be handy.
Yeah, I would say when you need to do a lot of repetitive tasks, then you want to look at this, because probably then you have something where you would add a custom builder, basically. Otherwise, probably you're good with all the defaults or maybe a couple of the community builders.
Cool. From Tom, is there a space where people publish their custom builders for other people to use?
Yeah, there is, and let me give it to you so that you can also put it in the YouTube chat, because there is one. I need to look it up. It's always good to have this one. Let me search for the website. Is it this one? Yeah. I'm putting it in the private chat.
Yep.
So yes, there is a place. The Santosh, the GDE from Angular in India, he made a Angular app for Angular builders where people can add it with a pull request.
Nice, I didn't know about it.
Yeah,
Useful.
I'm not
Thank
sure
you.
if every builder is there, but at least that's the one I use sometimes.
Cool. We have another one from John. Another question. How do you add a custom builder to the Angular app?
Yeah, okay. Maybe it's good to
Again.
share my screen again. And
Yep.
there are two ways. So one is by hand, and I will show it with my Angular.json. And the other one is basically with schematics. And schematics is something different than Angular builders, and where builders are using basically the files in your Angular workspace to make an output for example, to JavaScript, to your production code. Schematics basically are generators that generate the code. So if we do ng new, that's basically schematic, where everything is templated and scaffolded in a specific way. And 9 out of 10 Angular builder packages, the people that are publishing them, are also adding a schematic, which you can then say ng add and do. It will generate it basically in the Angular.json. And if it's not there, then you need to add it by hand. And let me just quickly let me hook something up here. Give me a sec. Share a screen again. Just this one. Okay, so let me close a couple of these out. So the ng build and the ng serve is basically from the schematic, right? When we just generate a application, then the Angular CLI schematic that's in there will just say, okay, just do have this structure and have these properties. If we have a custom builder, then we just basically can do something similar like this. So you could easily do, and I hope Birmingham, and then do something like this, and then I can say, okay, add a builder, and that's this one, and then I want to add some options. So you could do it by hand basically. And if you publish a builder in your team or whatever, I would definitely look at schematics, because ng-add isn't that hard to learn. There are a lot of good resources out there, but you could do it by hand. It's basically just add something to the JSON. That's basically what it is.
Cool.
I hope I answered his question.
Thanks for the question.
You're muted, Leon.
Leon,
you're
muted.
still muted. I think you're muted in StreamYard.
Oh,
yeah.
Right.
There we go.
Better.
So I do have some questions for the benefit of people watching, actually, because I know there's a lot of people who are new to Angular who come and watch us, or at least don't have much experience. So you talked about when you create your builder, you have this JSON file that allows you to create options. Yep. Now, are we limited? Because I saw that it was asynchronous, the way that you was building those options up. Are you limited to just using a JSON file? Could you use something that's external to the application? So CDN or API now? So it's
no.
in the application.
well, not for the specific builder options. So of course you can make an HTTP call to something and then validate there if there are like a JSON somewhere on a server. But if you want to have like a validation on the inputs, where people can say, oh, the quality in my example, or the folder, and you want to be specifically that's a number and a string or a specific regex, like regular expressions. If you want these kinds of stuff, then you need to use a schema, because that basically the Angular CLI under the hood uses, I think it's called the JSON schema package or something like that, where they say, okay, if there is this coming in and this defined like a type and a number, then it needs to be a number, and they will really check if that's equal to each other.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then just to touch on the overrides. So in your example, you used a production override. Now, again, for the benefit of the watchers, what are those used for? What's the benefit of using overrides?
Yeah, so first off, let me recur to at least the Angular version 12. So what the Angular team did, they did a production by default. So I should change my slide and remove the production flag there, because for everybody that's listening, by default, Angular CLI builds everything in production. But let's say you want to have a development configuration where you want to have your source map. Then you would use like for the override, for example. And in the options structure, there's a production property there, and you can add a development property there. And then you can say, okay, here I want to have the source maps specifics. And then you can use like -- configuration development, and then it will output the code with the source map. And that's basically, for example, if you go to a testing stage or something like that.
Yeah.
Did I answer your question now? Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, good. Previously, for the people that we had the -- prod, and then it was configuration production, basically.
Yeah.
But it's removed, so we don't have to worry about it anymore.
Yeah, brilliant. I mean, yeah, I think the only questions that cropped up really that might help people.
Okay, great. Yeah, but maybe a bit. Schematics is generating code, default structures, templates, basically, and builders are like custom implementations that will not affect your code, but just output something differently or compile it to JavaScript. And you can think about a couple of these things.
It's probably worth mentioning actually. So the question that I had about can we use options that are external to the application? I say the reason being is because this is compilation time, so it has to happen before we use the application.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the main reason. And when it runs, it basically does, okay, give me the JSON, give me the specific property. It's a type number. Okay, then it is indeed equal. And it's, by the way, the same for schematics. So schematics has the same approach. And if you have something different there and you do validations on a specific number or a specific regex, whatever, it will also fail. Because the context part there, the under the hood thing, it's basically the same. It's a little bit different, but the same.
Cool.
Great stuff. I do have some questions for Muhammad. So I noticed that you mentioned in your talk that the HTTP client method, whatever that may be, it might be a get, a post, a patch, it returned an observable. Now, are we limited to only returning that type, or can we return promises or synchronous or asynchronous?
Yeah, to answer this question, by default, is Angular provides so that that's kind of observable, so that we will be like consuming we will be getting the data in terms of like callback, and we are using that callback. Now, in terms of like if I want that to be in a promise, so the main reason behind why observables come, that actually comes after the promises. So the main difference between observables and promises are observables like we can subscribe, and when we are when we are destroying our component and we are going to another component, so we can unsubscribe to this observable to make to avoid some memory leaks kind of stuff. So however, in promises we can't do that. So that's why actually by default we have the observables in the return types of this those verbs which comes inside that Angular HTTP. So for if now I want to perform some asynchronous behavior inside those methods of HTTP verbs inside those HTTP client, so I can do that by manually. Like let's suppose I have a method one, so I can initiate that method with the keyword of async, and I can perform an await keyword with the terms of a statement. So I can do that as well. So with a bunch of observable, I can handle the async kind of stuff as well.
Good. So some people may not be familiar with the client, Angular's client, and things like Axios. They provide us a way to intercept data and modify the response. Is that something that we can do with HTTP's client?
Yes,
Angular's
we
client,
can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can do that under the hood. Like I have missed one thing which I recognize in the Jeff talk. So there was like creating there was like creating an interface, like binding the data. Like assume that from my backend I'm getting like around 150 object properties. Now I only want 5 or 6 properties, so I have to create an interface, which is kind of very powerful concept in Angular. However, in the object-oriented programming paradigm. But there was actually I missed that due to the shortage of time. So kind of stuff we can also do that.
Yeah. I mean, you covered quite a lot really in the time that you had. I think it was very detailed.
Yeah.
I got a question.
Yeah. Okay.
So I saw, I think unrelated to this Axios thing, I saw John Papa, he did a talk, I can't remember when, probably at NGConf anyway, about starting with Angular basically, and the idea was that you don't actually need HTTP client.
No, yeah.
You don't need to know RxJS, because it's quite a steep learning curve. Like if you go from, let's say, plain JavaScript and you start to learn Angular, there is so much to learn. It's a lot. Yeah, it's awesome once you get it.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, so I just wondered if you've seen any projects or any even hobby, maybe GitHub, projects where people can look at like, okay, I don't want to learn HTTP and RxJS and all that. I just want to get something working with Angular. I'm not sure if you guys know anything where that doesn't use HTTP client to point people to.
Okay.
Because you could use Axios in the end, why not?
Yeah. So I saw the same talk, and I really liked it because I love Angular. I love all the tools that it provides, and I'm really big on Angular. But it's probably important to say that, like you say, we can use Axios. We don't have to split components into just the TypeScript and the HTML and CSS. We can have it as a single component now, the way that Angular's evolved. And coming to Angular with the same thoughts you have with React and Vue, it is very flexible. You don't have to jump straight into using everything that Angular provides because, like Alex has just said, there's quite a steep learning curve. So just take one tool at a time and just build it the way that you're sort of used to, and then over time you can learn all of what's to offer with Angular.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To be very
There
honest,
is-
yeah. Go ahead.
There's a bit of downside, of course, if you do Axios, but
yeah.
and that's good to know because for a fun project, go ahead. And if you know what the Angular internals are, go ahead. Be my guest. But what under the hood, the HTTP client does a lot of things, and also the change detection, for example. And one of the things you maybe have seen in Mohammed's presentation also is that he can subscribe to a get and Reddit, for example, but the observable is also gone after that. Because that's something that happens under the hood of the HTTP client. With normal observables, that's not the case. So then you get a lot of memory stuff there. So use the HTTP client, guys. Don't use the unless you know what you're doing.
And you don't have to unsubscribe from the HTTP client.
Yeah. To be very honest, I already worked for a React project on a kind of team, which was like the client was from Tanzania, so he like deadly want the project on the React. So I do that in the React, but like when time beings like we are going in the NT pattern. So kind of what the good thing Angular provides is Angular have a consistency and a convenient way of doing things. Like you can also do that, but there are actually some standard ways and paths defined by the Angular community. And to be very honest, I'm very proud of to be part of that amazing community. So like we are having with amazing tech talks throughout our Angular groups and kind of stuff. So like I love those stuff. So in by the means of if you are following the consistency and consideration provided by Angular, so the main good thing is like you don't have to stuck in the NT patterns. However, if you are doing like vanilla things, so like the more chances are to go in the NT patterns.
Cool. Another question, just wondered. On HTTP, the way you get the data back from the APIs, sometimes is not consistent, especially with the old APIs and stuff. So I wonder how do you separate, if you separate your interfaces, whatever is this, let's send data and sending data to an API and getting data from the API. So that interface to what you actually use in the app, which you might not even use all the data that the API provides. Especially with the old APIs, you get like a lot of data and you only need, maybe 5 properties from there. So I just wondered, if you do this kind of mapping and which level do you do it? And that's for all of you as well.
Yeah. Okay, so for answering this question, actually we can parcel out our interfaces. Like let's suppose I have an interface which is like, okay, I only want these 6 parameters by default in any condition. Either like they don't have to worry about like that should be a base interface. So like let's suppose by consuming the post HTTP client method, now assume that I have to pass some method like that is actually related to the base interface, so I can directly using the base interface. Now let's suppose I have overridden, I have created another interface by consuming 2 of the interfaces, so like I can consume and like get multiple kind of stuff. So that's actually a concept of separation of concerns inside your interfaces. So that's kind of advanced topic in the encapsulation world. So we can do that by that will be actually a good thing. So, however, now we can also do some destructuring concepts of JavaScript. So we can also achieve that in some kind of level, but not that perfectly. But to go in beyond and with the best practices by community, so we can do that in the advanced topic and deep dive with that interfaces.
Cool.
Yeah, I would generate the types.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's an approach. So basically, you see that a lot of APIs, if you go to a standardization, for example, the Open API specification, formerly called Swagger, I think it was, you get always a JSON object. And then you can just generate types, and basically by some simple TypeScript typing, you can just basically get a part of the interface that's generated for that. So the main reason why I say generate is, one, you know for sure that it's based on the latest version of your API. So that's not an issue anymore. You don't have to make any adjustments. And you can just use TypeScript in a specific way that you can destructure a couple of these things. And if the destructuring is, how do you say it, a lot of work in code lines, make an operator for that, share it on a higher level, and so that you easily can do this.
Yeah.
And sorry, go ahead, Leon.
Yeah, so I'll touch on this. So because Angular is heavily built on TypeScript, as you know, will offer the partial, whereby we can just take what we need from that interface. And with it being built heavily on RxJS as well, we are open to be able to use lots of high order functions. So as part of that stream of that observable, we can map, we can filter, we can do all sorts of things. So it makes it very easy to do that. And like Jeffrey said, if we're going to maybe use this quite often throughout, use a service that's shareable. But yeah, I would do it at the highest level before it comes into the component that we need to use it in.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And if you use GraphQL, share the schemas, basically, or the schema types, I think they call it. But then you get the same thing as generation of code based on the Open API specification. And we're not going into GraphQL probably, but the destructuring there is a little bit easier.
Yeah.
But that's basically how GraphQL is set up.
Yeah, that's a whole nother conversation, the GraphQL.
Yeah. Maybe a next meetup.
Yeah,
definitely. Okay, if there's no other questions, then we're gonna wrap it here. But before I wrap it up, if you wanna join an awesome community and help other people learn Angular and get help for your questions and find other meetups to join, and just be part with other fun people, please join Angular Nation. It's an awesome community. And Bonnie's gonna look after all of us. She's amazing. So I will also drop that link in here for it. I think it's angularnation.net. I'll just drop it in here in the chat. And thank you very much, Jeffrey and Muhammad. I'm not sure if he's got some internet connection issues, but thank you very much again.
Gone.
And we'll see you all next time then. Thank you very much.
See you next time all. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.